Something happened behind closed doors in Washington that nobody is talking about. Not in the press briefings, not on cable news, not in any of the official statements coming out of the White House. But it happened. And the moment it did, everything changed. Because 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump, the man who built his entire brand on never backing down, never blinking, never giving an inch, quietly sent a signal to Beijing, a signal that said, "We are ready to talk." And then he did the same with Tehran. And the whole world looked up and said, "Wait, what just happened?" Now, most people are calling this a flip-flop, a retreat, a sign of weakness from a weakened president. They are wrong, completely wrong. What actually happened is far more calculated, far more alarming, and far more revealing about the state of American power than anything you have heard in the mainstream coverage. And I am going to show you exactly what it is, but I need you to stay with me until the end, because the real reason, the one that explains everything, does not come until the final part of this video. And when it lands, it will completely change how you read every headline you see from this point forward. Let us start at the beginning. To understand why Trump is suddenly pivoting to negotiations, you have to understand how he thinks, not politically, not ideologically, transactionally. Trump does not see the world in terms of allies and enemies the way traditional politicians do. He sees it in terms of leverage. Who has it, who needs it, who is pretending to have it, and, most importantly, who is about to lose it. That framework is everything, because once you understand it, his entire second term starts making sense in a way it simply does not if you're watching through the usual lens. When Trump came back to the White House, he arrived with a clear theory. America had been taken advantage of, its generosity had been exploited, its openness had been weaponized against it, and the fix was pressure. Hard, sustained, unapologetic pressure. Tariffs on China, sanctions on Iran, threats aimed at anyone who did not fall in line. The plan was simple. Make the cost of crossing America so unbearable that every adversary would eventually come crawling to the table on American terms. And for a brief window, it looked like it was working. Markets moved, phone calls came in, governments started adjusting, the pressure was landing. But then something shifted. China did not fold, Iran did not collapse, and the economic data coming back to Washington started telling a story that nobody in the administration wanted to hear. Here is what that data was saying. The tariffs were not just hurting China. They were raising prices for American families. They were disrupting supply chains that American companies had spent 20 years building. They were creating a fog of uncertainty that was making investors pull back, businesses freeze, and markets behave in ways that made Trump's closest allies genuinely nervous. And China had changed since 2018. The last time Trump ran this playbook, China was more exposed, more dependent on American demand, more vulnerable to a sudden shock. But in the years between then and now, Beijing had done something quietly and deliberately. It had prepared. It had diversified its export markets. It had deepened domestic consumption. It had built relationships across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East that gave it room to absorb pain without breaking. So when the tariffs hit, China absorbed them, retaliated selectively, restricted rare earth exports that American manufacturers depend on, and then sent a very clear message through its posture. We are ready for a long game. Are you? That question landed hard inside Washington, because a long game is exactly what Trump cannot afford. He has a political clock ticking, an economy that is starting to show strain, an approval rating that is sensitive to every point the stock market drops, and an opposition that is watching, waiting, ready to hammer the message that his strategy is causing more pain at home than damage abroad. Meanwhile, Iran had its own answer to the pressure campaign. 7 years of maximum pressure, 7 years of sanctions tightening, currency collapsing, population suffering, and yet Iran today has more advanced nuclear capabilities than it did the day Trump first withdrew from the nuclear deal. More centrifuges, higher enrichment levels, deeper ties with Russia and China, a regional network that has only expanded under pressure. The maximum pressure strategy did not stop Iran's nuclear program. In some measurable ways, it accelerated it. So now, Trump is sitting with 2 failing pressure campaigns, a restless economy, nervous markets, and a world that is not cooperating with the script. And this is where the real calculation begins. This is where the pivot happens. And this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. Here is the real reason. It is not weakness. It is not a change of heart. It is not pressure from advisors or panic from markets alone. The real reason Trump is suddenly reaching for negotiations is that he has read something that almost no public commentator is saying out loud. The window is closing. Not tomorrow, not next month, but it is closing. And Trump, the deal maker, the man who has spent his entire life reading when to push and when to close, he can feel it. Here is what that means. American leverage, real leverage, the kind that comes from unmatched financial dominance, unquestioned military supremacy, and a dollar that nobody can rout around, that leverage is not what it was 10 years ago. It is still formidable. It is still the most powerful force in the global system, but it is no longer absolute. Countries that were once fully dependent on American-led financial architecture have been quietly building alternatives, not fast enough to challenge dollar dominance today, but fast enough to make the trend line visible to anyone paying attention. Technology competition with China is real and accelerating. The semiconductor restrictions did not stop Beijing, they activated it. China poured resources into domestic chip development at a scale and speed that surprised even pessimistic analysts. And America's alliance network, the web of relationships that multiply American power across every continent, that network is showing cracks. Not breaks, cracks. But in a structure that depends on trust, cracks matter. What Trump has internalized, whether he would ever say this way or not, is this. The best deals are made when your leverage is at its peak, not after it has eroded, not after alternatives have fully developed, not after your opponents have had years to adapt and consolidate. Right now. Now is when the deal has the most favorable terms available. Wait too long and the terms shift. The other side gains time. The alternatives mature. The urgency moves from them to you. Trump does not want history to record that he held the strongest hand and waited too long to play it. So the negotiations are not a retreat. They are the most aggressive move available. A calculated decision to lock in gains, claim a headline, and shape the terms of the next phase of competition before the window closes. This is not the end of the pressure. This is the pressure reaching its most sophisticated form. The question is whether the other side, patient, prepared, and operating on a completely different time horizon, will give him the headline he needs, or make him wait just long enough for the balance to shift. That is the game being played right now, right in front of us, and most people watching the headlines have absolutely no idea. Now you do. If this gave you a new lens on what you are watching unfold, subscribe and turn on notifications, because these shifts are moving faster than the news cycle can track, and the next piece of this story is already developing.